start recording. So hi everybody. Today we are working on scaffolding for success. So hopefully everybody can see the slide, Svetlana. Excellent, thank you. Fabulous. So scaffolding is really important as you build the course, and especially from week to week. It also builds really good consistency with the students. It gives them a pathway to their success. So let's talk about maybe why you would scaffold. And some of those reasons are very similar to the reasons we've talked to in some of these webinars, which is it provides consistency. It builds students' confidence, which is really, really important. It creates self-regulated learners, which we haven't talked about a lot. So scaffolding provides an opportunity for students to become independent learners. So as they understand the assignment or the task or the activity that you're giving them, they start to be more and more confident, and they take more and more on independently and start to figure out stuff themselves and what you're looking for. And they're asking less and less questions of you. Scaffolding also helps internalize new understandings. And so as we know how the brain works is information is not stored in isolation in the brain, that it's connected some way. And usually that's by familiarity. So if something you're familiar with, you can then connect new understandings to that familiar thing. And so as you build your scaffolding, each piece is really building a bridge for the student to go from not understanding to mastering the knowledge or skills. So what really is scaffolding? So we talk a lot about, in educational psychology and in curriculum design, we talk a lot about Vygotsky. And Vygotsky was an educational psychologist, one of the first real original psychologists. And what he was really interested was in how a person learns in their environment, and particularly in school. And what he found was that you really need to provide a structure in order to move a person from one level to the next. So as they master skills and they go on to challenge, they really need this bridge to be built for them. And we talked about that a little bit about that before, which was the cognitive load of the student's brain. You want it to be concentrated on the learning and not trying to figure out what they're supposed to be doing, right? You know, the logistics, right? We want the logistics to be really easy. We want them to be concentrating. And so scaffolding provides that for you. It provides that structure. Also, it helps them interact with their classmates and others and be engaged in the learning, because it gives them a pathway. So, you know, when you introduce new learning, think of it that a student is standing in the middle of a deep, dense forest, and they're not sure where the path is, and you know, they're really sort of stuck. And as you provide your scaffolding, you're really building a path for them to navigate that forest and get to the end result, which is mastery. Instructional scaffolding also talks about how it enhances the learning and mastery and allows students to go beyond what they normally would be able to learn without the scaffolding. So by providing this pathway for them, you're actually aiding them in gaining a higher level of mastery of the skill. The other thing is that students want to be independent learners, right? They want to be able to do it themselves. They don't always want to have to ask the instructor what to do, right? They want to do it. And so by providing the scaffolding consistently over and over, and you can actually reduce the amount of scaffolding the more and more they become familiar with the way that you're teaching and learning them. So it's a really great way to have them become really dependent. And more so when we think about scaffolding, we know that when you're teaching digitally, whether it's online or whether it's asynchronous or synchronous remote, that scaffolding is even more important, right? Because you don't have those personal interactions in the classroom to help them step by step or stand over their shoulder and watch them do things, right? So that's now gone. So that scaffolding is what takes place now that you can't look over their shoulder. So we're going to talk about the framework for scaffolding. So the framework that we're going to talk, there's a whole bunch of frameworks, right? So there's tons and tons of people who come up with scaffolding frameworks. I like this one in particular. It's really easy to understand and implement for the instructor, and it's really easy for the students to understand. And that's, of course, the I do, we do, you do framework. And for that framework, oop, there we go. Oop, well, we went too far. There we go. So here's a little chart that sort of explains it. There are 4 different levels of scaffolding, which is the first level, or the novice level for the student, which is explicit modeling, which is pretty much 100% the teacher's responsibility, where the student is just listening, watching, demoing. You know, you're demoing something. That's really the lowest level of you're lecturing to them, so they're sort of really absorbing what you're doing. And then as we get levels, so your responsibilities lessen and the student's own independent responsibilities gain traction. And so the next level is called shared demonstration, which I like to call sort of a modeling demonstration. And that demonstration is that the students are doing that themselves with you, right? So now you're not just talking alone, but you're actually having the students demonstrate. And often this happens in the classroom, like through discussion. So you may talk about a problem on the board, and then you have them come up and show you how they would do it, right? So they do that together. The next stage is what we call practice, where they do some practice with your instructions. So basically you say, here are the 5 steps to do on your own to practice these problems. So often this takes the form of homework, where they're sort of guided through the process. And then finally, the stage is called independent practice, where it's the student on their own is responsible to continue practicing, in this case, more problem sets, right? So you're getting them. And then there's only one stage after that, which I like to include, which is called assessment, right? Because once they do all this, we need to assess their mastery of what they've walked through the scaffolding. And is there any questions about that?
No, it makes sense.
Okay, great. So how do we go about this, right? So even though this is a great chart, I still find that it's a little confusing. So I broke it down into the I do, we do, you do steps, which is first is orientation. So this is where you're introducing the topic to the student, you're giving them the basic content, you are orientating them, you're telling them how what they're learning now relates to what they just learning and how it will relate to learning later on, right? So you're giving context to the learning. You might show a video. They may read an article. They might watch or read a poem. They could watch you do problems. They may read their textbooks. This is all part of orientation. And a lot of times we call them where they're, think about it when they're absorbing work, right? They're absorbing. They're not really doing stuff. They're watching, they're reading, all that kind of absorbing. The next step is modeling. And that's where you're modeling to them and they're still watching, right? So they're not doing themselves yet, but they're watching you do examples. And so you're doing problems on the boards, or you're showing them how to write a theme sentence to the paper, where you're doing them step by step and they're watching you and can ask questions. So we call that a modeling. And then next is where you do small group work in your classroom, right? So small group work may be things like turn around and talk to your partner, you know, in your friend in your classroom and discuss these 3 things. Or I'm going to give you all the problems, see if you can do it, and then we're going to talk about it. And then application, right? Application is that independent practice where they're actually doing the skill and then you're going to assess that skill. So let's talk about each of these as an example. So first, we're going to show an example of a create welcome video, which you do in if you've taken the EPTO course. And the create welcome video starts off with the first part, which is orientation, right? Learner needs time to listen, understand, and absorb what they're going to be doing in the classroom, you know, or online in this case, right? They have to prepare themselves and read your instructions and understand. And so I have an example of that where I give them the first parts of the content, right? What are you going to do? In order to create a video, welcome video, they first need to learn about how to script, how to use multimedia, how to narrate their lectures. So they're going to do all that content, right? So I'm not doing videos or I'm not doing live class here, but I'm giving them all the content for them to read themselves. So you could give them the textbook homework, you know, read chapter 2. That's where we get the orienting, sorry, I keep saying that word wrong. And then the second step now is we want to model for them what a welcome video looks like. So they can have, you can provide them things like a rubric. That would be part of modeling. So you're giving them the criteria in order to figure out what you're looking for in the process. You can give them case studies. A lot of people do case studies at this point. Demonstration videos for if you're doing a lab. You know, you're having them do problem sets. You know, you're modeling that. And what we do with modeling, both technical and content really, is we're demonstrating, right? We're demonstrating. But you want to give them both the good and the bad, right? You want to give them some way to know where they are, where they can self-assess their own learning ability and an understanding of where they are in the process. And so in the create the video assignment that I give them, I actually give them examples. So here's my first, a good example, and then I give them a not so good example. So they actually get to see other faculty creating their welcome videos. In both of these examples, the faculty also reflect on their experience of creating their first videos. So they can really understand and reflect on their own learning, and they can reflect on how they understand what they're going to do as they start to practice these things. And that leads us to practice. So practice is then when we either do it in group or we have them do it on. They start to work that out themselves. And where they're actually starting to do the homework that you've given them, they're starting to work out and practice. Now, practice means that it is low stakes. It could be no points or very little points, right? So they need a chance to practice before you can really assess them. You could give them a low-level quiz, right, to see if they practiced some of those questions, or you could have them write a draft paper. That is the practice, right? So you really don't want to penalize them during this practice. You want to give them a chance to figure out what they know and what they don't know, and self-assess. So in this link, I give them a chance to discuss amongst themselves. So they start to practice, they start to post, and they start to talk about some of the problems they're encountering. And so everyone benefits in the discussion from hearing from each other where their struggles are. And so they're all sort of practicing getting their set up at home correct, where they're going to record. They're having trouble with the technology, they're working it out, right? All these things start to get worked out in this discussion forum. And so that is, maybe you'll have the students do a problem set alone, and then when you meet with them online in a synchronous session, you go over that with them, and they can ask questions, and there's no penalizing for that, right? They're still practicing and learning. And then finally is the actual application. And so for the application, of course, they have to create their own first, welcome video, and demonstrate that they've gained the ability to actually create videos and do a good job according to the rubric that I've given them. So in this case, they actually have to create a video and then post it so that everyone else can see how they did, right? And so now I have a rubric that I can grade against and assess whether they have mastery and how they've made it. Right? So does anybody have questions about that, about this process?
I like this concept that during the practice in group or independent, like on this step, I give them before the real test, I give them many quizzes, and I am available to help during those quizzes, and also I give them bonus points during those quizzes towards the test. So they will not be scary if they do not do very well on this preparation work, preparation practice. But they encourage it because they actually can get some bonus points instead of losing something.
Now, do you want to show us how you're doing it in your courses?
Um, uh, you mean right now?
Yeah, sure.
Uh,
You don't have to.
I'm not ready right now because, like, I just give them some quizzes, um, because actually I do not have some examples right now, and those quizzes will cover the material part of the real test, and so they can practice, use what they studied already, ask questions afterwards if they didn't do very well, and they understand that some part of the material was kind of missing for them, like that. I can give you right now the example, sorry.
That's okay. That's okay. No worries. So have you been able in like synchronous sessions to help them work through the problems?
Like actually yes. For example, like working in emporium classes. Um, uh, Practically, our class consists of students working independently on their computers and study the material, and I, I just choose from time to time. Some students go to the breakout group, making breakout group,
Yeah,
and
that's great.
sharing with them a screen, white, whiteboard. Uh, we just discuss. I can see in Alex, I can see on which problems they are working and what they did wrong, so I can uh, kind of uh, suggest to them some better way. Or just some way how to solve it correctly. And all my classes in Emporium are just in this way. So I go from group to group, from individual to individual, and helping them. The same as in the class when I worked, like going around the class and students working on on their own learning path. So the same here, I go from one student to another with some small groups and explain to them what they do wrong in this particular topic.
Yeah, that's great. The breakout rooms, yeah, they should work pretty well with the whiteboard.
Yeah. So they write on this whiteboard, and they actually like it. So it is a little bit difficult for them in the beginning to write on it, but it's fine. It adds some funny stuff to this process, so that's good. Yeah, works pretty well.
Yeah, that's great. And then they have the because you using My Labs, or are you using
No,
um,
I use Alex. Alex.
yeah, Alec. Yep.
Mm-hmm. And
Yeah.
during the knowledge checks, of course, I do not help them. Uh, I just watch over them. And but during the learning path, it calls learning path in Alex when they work independently on their own learning path, and I can help them like making those groups or individual chatting, and they like that it is actually individual, so others can hear it, so they feel comfortable just to be alone with me, or or just in a small, very small group, so they will not feel uncomfortable. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it's good that Alex has like that knowledge check, and then it does the quiz, and then it shows them where it's gone wrong and stuff. So that's really a really nice guided practice.
Yeah, actually, yeah, very good. Yeah, yeah.
Sounds great. Do you have any questions about?
Not yet.
So that's all I have today.
Okay, okay, very good.
Yep, we can continue to talk. So I'm just gonna finish off here and stop the recording, and then we can talk more. So of course, for the webinars, you can always find them under the spots.
Mhm,
Um, you can also find a lot of learning, and especially the scaffolding,
mhm,
under Learning to Go, which is on our website, on our Explore website.
mhm.
You can find it there under our learning guides, and of course, you can always email us at askeco.com .ccri.edu.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay.